Welcome to Next in Health. I'm Glenn Hunzinger, PwC's Health Industries Leader. We are in San Francisco for the JPM Healthcare Conference. Exciting time of the year, my favorite time of the year to talk about what is ahead. A lot of this conference talks about great science, the M&A activity. Our previous episode hit a lot on that. In this episode, we're going to be talking about investing in health. Obviously, previous episodes, we talked about $1 trillion shift we think is going to happen in the reallocation of profit pools. So we're going to talk in this session about it. I'm joined by two esteemed colleagues of mine, Jeremy Gelber, who's a partner at Vitruvian, and Claire Love, who runs PwC's deals strategy practice. Thanks for both of you for being here. Jeremy, let's start with you. As we think about the future of health and the changes that are going to happen around personalized medicine, longevity, and sort of the new value pools that are going to be created, how do you think about that? How do you wrap your head around that?
So I think we really should be thinking about three changes. The first is around how clinical care delivery comes to the patient. So we're moving out of a time period where care is going to be in facilities to a time when care is going to be delivered to the person in their home in a personalized way. This helps us solve some of our access problems from a rural health perspective, and it also enables people to sort of get care where they want, which is in their home, and take more control over that. The second is getting after some of the administrative efficiency. So 30 cents of every healthcare dollar goes to basically just sort of waste. That's really where I think AI will be most impactful. I don't think AI is, best used for finding like needles in haystacks and, determining cancer 20 years before it happened. I think it's really about streamlining the administrative efficiency in how care is delivered, streamline the administrative efficiency in how care is paid for, and physicians, payers, and how we get that whole process approved. I think the third is this sort of personalized medical revolution. We're moving out of a time period where we're all about just, treating diseases when we determine them to really preventing disease. That allows people to take a lot more ownership of their health. And you're seeing that with the growth of the supplements industry. You're seeing that with the growth of peptides and certainly, GLP-1s.
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, listen, $5 trillion U.S. healthcare spend growing at 8%, it's untenable, right? And this idea that, technology can just create these efficiencies, remove some of the friction, and obviously help us with the affordability of all the great innovation that's happening. So Claire, as you think about that, given all the aspects are changing, what kind of unique investment areas when you think about long-term sort of pockets and tailwinds?
Absolutely. So one area that I'm really excited about is women's health. I think that it is an area of investment arbitrage fundamentally because it is underinvested in today. When you look at it from a private equity lens, you look at it from a venture capital lens, you look at it from a pharma lens, there are disproportionately few dollars that have flown to women's health historically. And I actually think they're phenomenal business models and money to be made in that space by actually scaling and meeting the unmet needs of women where they are. So whether that's looking at fertility, where we have seen some scaled businesses already start to flow, but also looking at things like menopause, where we're starting to see some really exciting changes in care with HRT kind of coming back as an actual recommendation for women in menopause, and looking beyond just kind of the sexual health space of menopause, but really thinking more holistically about oncology, cardiology, immunology. There's so many opportunities. So women's health is a space where I think there's lots of money to be made and lots of unmet need to go after.
Yeah, I think that the rise of consumerism certainly fits into that. People want personalized attention, not sort of health for men that sort of, by default ends up with women. So maybe we'll set the scene, the investment scene, right? Investing in health is really difficult with regulatory environments. People talk about investing. Nobody wants to deal with stroke of the pen type risk. But Jeremy, maybe we'll go back to you. When you think about sort of the regulatory environment, reimbursement, what are the things you think are needed to really provide those sort of tailwinds for the industry and certainly investing in for patients?
So right now, there's just too much friction between, providers and payers, whether that's federal and state governments, or whether that is, commercial insurance plans, or more even frequently now your employer, as more and more companies move to being like self-insured. There's a real opportunity for technology to reduce that friction, to enable better clinical documentation, better coding to enable real-time prior authorizations really embedded in and using the payer logic to make sure that things aren't dropped and lost, that there's follow-ups to, incidental findings, or that people are actually getting some of this like preventative care that they're supposed to be getting. We just can't sort of over-regulate and create sort of complications that then limit the use of technology. The other big opportunity is around fraud, waste, and abuse. Get after that wasteful spending and direct it to beneficiaries who really need it and get the care that they need and deserve, but do it in an adherent way is another really big opportunity.
Yeah, the interesting thing about interstate commerce in the world of technology, to be able to cross those state lines, super important. Obviously, they showed the ability to do that during COVID. There's certainly a pathway there. Claire, when you think about advising clients and investing in the regulatory environment, what do you look for? What are those things that sort of pop out to you?
So, this has definitely been a period of high degrees of uncertainty. And I think the key is scenario planning, frankly. I think you cannot assume that the way things have been historically is how the future will be. And so when we think back to 2025, right, there were so many changes that happened. And when you think about NIH funding, we saw significant drops in early 2025 in clinical trial starts. That has rebounded now. Now there are real questions around, will there be single pivotal trials? That is a significant source of uncertainty, right? Could be really powerful, may be less than what is potentially out there, but it's a real point of uncertainty. So I think the key for investors is to scenario plan fundamentally and think about multiple possible outcomes and plan their investments accordingly.
Yeah. It does hurt, it hurts capital deployment because you think about all of these changes that have happened at the FDA. Those sort of chill people who, want to spend R&D in a certain way. Now they have to scenario plan for, a different regulatory regime. You look at value-based care. We've had so many models. Everybody agrees that value-based care is a good idea, moving from fee-for-service to paying for outcomes. But literally every administration comes in and they sort of cut off models that might have been working from the old administration. They build their own models. So even though fundamentally a lot of the data or the care delivery is sort of portable model to model, you still have to invest and create, some degrees of new infrastructure to access those. So it really just slows the overall adoption.
Yeah, it certainly hits things like health at home health when you have that. You don't have those sort of trajectories.
Absolutely.
So definitely a difficult sort of environment to invest in. And you're right. Certainly it seems like change is going to only be the only constant that happens, particularly with what we're dealing with today. So shifting to maybe a more exciting topic, and technology and AI. And the theme here across AI is not just AI within health tech, with the best mousetrap or what have you, but really thinking about AI as enabled to invest in businesses that you can transform technologically or otherwise. So kind of a different, interesting couple of lenses to think about. So Jeremy, I'm going to start with you. When you think about investing around technology, around AI, what do you look for? How do you think about, what's your lens there,
Yeah, so I think it's all about real ROIs for the product. Like ambient listening have been shown to have real ROIs in terms of speed by which, they're, getting notes done, as well as the ability to, capture charges, more revenue. Things that are more around the clinical decision support side, it's more of a question today whether AI alone is actually better than the physician alone, or is it some sort of AI and physician model that's going to lead to the best decision making. So we're really look at some of that more like administrative side, revenue cycle, prior auth, payment integrity, transcribing, ambient listening, and think that's sort of the easiest place for AI to have an impact.
Yeah, certainly high volume activity, that middle layer of really operations.
Lots of people, lots of costs, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. AI is not only creating these opportunities from an efficiency perspective that everyone is focused on, but also growth, right? And at the end of the day, it's changing where a company's source of advantage can be. When I think about, pharma commercialization businesses in particular, a lot of those businesses are just seeing massive disruption from an AI lens. And so the question is, how can they really get ahead? And at this point in time, it's all about investing into AI and using it as a value creation lever. But maybe to take your question even in a different direction, the other technology that I get really excited about is robotics, because we talk about AI a lot, but robotics from a long-term perspective, there's just massive opportunity in the healthcare landscape. So whether it's thinking about robotics in a surgery room or even thinking about robotics we've talked about it, but whether it's, a robot that could actually even be the at-home caregiver for folks, so you can actually get people out of nursing homes and back into their houses and have care at home, right? I think there's many powerful opportunities.
We have a labor problem,
exactly.
In this country, especially on the caregiver side, or, the long-term social supports, home and community-based services side. Those two things don't jive, immigration policy and labor shortage. And therefore, you're going to have to find ways to take labor out of the equation.
Exactly.
Robotics is a way, remote monitoring is a way, and then using that data, pulling that data to, connect that person back into the care system to their families and other places. That's a, unbelievable sort of opportunity.
Yeah, and to think about it, there's almost $3 trillion of spending around labor, physician services of the $5 trillion. It's a massive amount of opportunity. So Claire, maybe just kicking it off as far as fundamentally investing in this environment. What's new? What's different? What feels the same? Maybe just talking about that. Where are we in that cycle?
Yes. So, I think there are a lot of underpinning themes that are continuations, right? And so we've talked about personalized medicine, continuation, right? There are other things which are changing in terms of the pace of change. So technology change is just at an incredible pace of change right now. Policy uncertainty is, I think, at a heightened degree of uncertainty, which does create this noise that you have to invest around. And so those are probably the two pieces that feel most different from prior cycles. But fundamentally, it's a really exciting time, and I'm very optimistic for the next year. Also, because of all of the capital that's out there to deploy and the interest rates coming down. And I think that's an important backdrop to why I'm optimistic for 2026.
Yeah, so totally agree. I think that technology is the big uncertainty. How fast will clinicians adopt technology? How fast will payers adopt technology? Will there be things that go directly to consumer and allow them to take a lot more control over their health than ever before? Which I think, is a really big opportunity. Very few people have access to their health data. Very few people can really be the quarterback of their own health in the way that they drive, their own financial decisions, for example, on the savings side or the investing side. I think, regulatory, it's always noise. Those cycles have sped up just because we have so much geopolitical dysfunction in this country. Healthcare will always have a state level, federal level sort of regulatory, overlap. And you just have to sort of figure that out. But figuring out where the impact of technology will be on the profit pools that's probably the biggest opportunity, but also the biggest risk.
Yeah, and I agree. In 2026, we should definitely see progress as far as all the opportunities in back office, middle office. It's sort of tried and true in all these other industries, so we should be able to figure it out even with sort of the regulatory environment there. So sort of shifting, which is a great topic, which is predictions for 2026. Maybe Claire, kind of kick us off with where do you see the investment starting to flow?
So, we are seeing it across the board in healthcare. So certainly to this technology discussion, healthcare IT, we are already seeing quite a lot of activity, and I expect that will absolutely continue into the new year. Or I guess we are in the new year, into this year. And then as well, I anticipate pharma services is going to come back in a major way, probably more so on the CRO and CDMO side, as we've seen the kind of clinical trial activity really rebound. And CDMOs folks see as there's a very strong moat around that ecosystem. MedTech and life sciences, MedTech has been crazy hot, and I think will continue to be really hot, both with interesting take privates and carve-outs, but really interesting deal structures in that ecosystem. So I think MedTech will continue to be a really hot space. Life science diagnostics, there are going to be lots of deals in that world as well. Many that will be more creative as well, because I think you're going to see carve-outs from some of the large players, and that's what we're going to end up kind of getting excited about this year.
And Jeremy, maybe you can give away some of your secret sauce. Maybe not too much here, but it's a little bit.
I don't think my bosses would like that. But look, healthcare technology, totally agree with Claire. There's just a lot of interesting businesses out there that are earlier stage, growing really rapidly. And then there's, larger companies that are embedding technology into their, previously more service delivery and just achieving both better results as well as, real scale to their unit economics. So we definitely see that. Biotech feels alive. If you're out here, at this conference, there's definitely a different vibe than there was a year ago, 2 years ago. Lilly, their party last night was like the hottest ticket in town. So there's definitely, between synthetic drug discovery and, all the different things that are happening there, it feels like, biotech funding is alive, and that's a good thing for the pharma services businesses. Agree that there'll be some, delivery model changes there, but that's, fundamentally a good thing for them. And then we think the payers are going to have a much better year. Last year was a very difficult year for a lot of the large managed care companies that really sort of took them out of the M&A market. We think a lot of that pain has sort of receded. This will be a year where they're really investing again in how they sort of unify service delivery and take more of a leadership standpoint on the technology side. They've been more sort of, just a follower to, all the different things the providers are doing. So.
Yeah, no doubt. And the biotech is pretty interesting in the previous podcast. I mean, at the end of the day, it's probably no better time to be a patient than ever now with where science has progressed and how people are talking about the patient, not from this thing that's out there, but the consumer aspect of the direct touch and making sure the experience is much different.
Really amazing opportunities, but also confusing.
Yeah.
So I think, this patient education, where do they turn for good information, high quality information? Who do they trust? Multiple people, talk to me about, longevity and supplements and, how should I get more on top of my health? But there's so much conflicting information out there. It's a little bit like the wild, wild west at this point. So I think seeing some gold standards start to emerge there in, sort of here's new recommendations for screening, new recommendations for, when do we treat different conditions? I think that's a really interesting application of AI. Some of these studies, like the Framingham Heart study, I mean, that's a 20-year-old study that was done on 40,000 people, right? Yep. Now you can literally grab data from millions of people who have had, cardiovascular disease and, really sort of, do this in a much more granular and totally different way in terms of setting guidelines and things like that. So.
Yeah, I think your interesting point on trust, Gen Z, there's a 3,000 basis points difference in trust versus baby boomers for the doctor. So baby boomers, doctor, whatever they say goes. Not the case. Only 50% of them trust their doctor, which is a staggering sort of data point.
Clinical delivery organizations are going to have to earn, the right to be that trusted resource to them. And actually have a brand. Very few of these guys actually have a brand from a clinical delivery standpoint. People go to the ER that's closest to them or the urgent care center that's sort of closest to them. They may have a personal identification with their doctor, but not a personal identification with their health system brand.
Yeah. But it's fascinating how comfortable people also are with loading their health records into ChatGPT, for example, and just asking for recommendations, right? And some of it is remarkably accurate at this point. So I think the question of almost what is your initial round of diagnostics through AI, and then you get to a doctor at some point in time, and how does that progress over time? It's going to be
if the physician-led organizations don't sort of do it themselves, people will do it 100% on their own. So
yeah, and the question of who's going to be the partner for life. But you're right, it just may be the technology that's out there. So as we look towards you guys have been around a long time in the field, what is the most exciting thing? Yeah, I mean, you guys are both young pups compared to me. So when you think about what's the one or two things that are you kind of, hey, this is where I keep my eye on that maybe others don't know about, or things that are really exciting when you think about us and our health and our kids and the next generation. So maybe Jeremy, you kick us off, and then Claire, bring us home.
I really think what I think is most exciting is people sort of, owning their own health journey in a way that, they previously haven't. So, having access to all of their diagnostic information, having access to all of their medical records and every visit they've had, having information about their personalized genome, having information about their family and their family inherited patterns, and then being able to actually make AI-guided, informed decisions around how they want to live their life. Exercise has been shown to be, highly preventive for neurocognitive diseases. Mm-hmm. If you have risks, that may be something that you decide to do. Whether different supplements, taking different medicines earlier than they're currently recommended. And, even, who you trust from a clinician perspective. So, I really think, and that's true in women's health, I think it's, going to be really true for different socio-demographic groups that typically had sort of less access to healthcare. But really this, time period where people sort of have their information, they have the tools to make informed decisions. I think that's just a transformation, and everyone's got to figure out what that means for them. Sort of the payer one-size-fits-all, sort of utilization management, prior auth lines doesn't work for that. The clinician sort of, hey, you're just gonna, come see me, I'm gonna give you these things to do, and then you're just gonna go do them and come back to me 6 months later. It doesn't work for that. So there's gonna have to be a sort of a different way that insurance and clinical delivery sort of interface with that sort of era.
So to me, the intersection of healthcare and technology is really what gets me most excited about the next year. And if I look back on last year, I had a rough year personally in terms of my father going into memory care, but that also showed me so much of thinking about what does that look like and feel like, and what should be the experience of someone in the future when they're at that stage, and what can the world look like of a caregiver, and how can you support people in those different life footprints. And so when I think about just the power of how we can better support patients, I think the power of technology is massive. And I think that is really what, for me, when I think to the future, gets me most excited about, is not only the powerful impact we can have on patients' lives, but empowering it through technology, which will also drive lower costs at the end of the day.
Yeah, healthcare is expensive, right? 18% of GDP, massive year over year inflation in, insurance premiums, et cetera. It's completely inefficient. And, it's a bad consumer experience. Nobody does NPS scores in healthcare, but if they did, they'd be really bad. Your insurance's NPS would be bad. Your go to a hospital, your NPS would be bad. Memory care, the NPS would be bad, So you have this opportunity to both sort of stop this massive inflation of spending while also improving sort of the consumer's experience of it and improving their ultimate health outcomes.
Yeah, there's so much great happening with innovation, yet we have this friction.
Exactly.
It seems like there's a clear path here, removing the friction, getting some of the cost down, tech enabling. So listen, thank you both for being here. Jeremy, Claire, I think you left our sort of viewers with great insight on sort of what to expect in 2026 and beyond. So appreciate your time here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Glenn.
So team, it'll be exciting to see what's ahead for 2026. On behalf of PwC, thank you both for being here. For more on these topics and other topics across health industries, please subscribe to our podcast at pwc.com/us/Next in Health podcast. Until next time, this has been Next in Health.
This podcast is brought to you by PwC, all rights reserved. PwC refers to the U.S. member firm or one of its subsidiaries or affiliates, and may sometimes refer to the PwC network. Each member firm is a separate legal entity. Please see www.pwc.com/structure for further details. This podcast is for general information purposes only and should not be used as a substitute for consultation with professional advisors.